Hello, everyone. My name is Ezra, otherwise known as E-Soup. I'm here. I made it. I had an appointment, but I'm not actually late, really. I mean, unless 2 minutes count. And I was like, oh, I'm going to be like 2 minutes late, and it's exactly 3:02. So I somehow calculated that. Um, so today we are continuing Volume 6. And we had a hell of a time in our first little portion of it. So I'm very excited. We're reading chapters 191 to 195. This might be a little bit of a longer stream. Because I like to do things in 8 streams. And this one is a little bit of a chunky boy, so we're doing like 57 pages today. A few of the streams are going to be a little bit longer, but I just decided I was fine with that. So here we go. It is still translating some of your comments, and I don't understand why. Henry, you said just thought, I'll make dinner after the stream starts, and then it started. This is a sign. A sign for you to make dinner? Or something else. So, I guess I'm gonna get started. We are on page 65 for chapter 191, Lunar New Year's Eve. It sounds like a nice time. It sounds like a good time. I don't want things to be sad. Let's have something nice. In the evening, north and south gathered. Xiao Qie lifted the curtain, and Shen Zichuan ducked to enter, leading Xiao Jiming's son Xiao Xun by the hand. Oh my god, we haven't... Oh my god. Have we seen him? Like, has he actually been there? Has Shen Zichuan met him before? I forget. The baby is here. The discussion in the hall came to a halt. The little boy took off his fur collar and oversleeves himself, then handed them to Gujin before making a beeline for his father and sitting politely on his heels at his father's side. During this interval, Qi Juyin tilted her head to whisper to Liu Yizhi, who was cradling her teacup in both hands. You didn't give your son away to him, did you? Before Liu Yizhi could answer, her son turned to look at Qi Juyin as if he'd sensed her question. She whispered back, Oh no, Xunar heard you. Xiao Xun bowed in greeting to Qi Juyin, who took a sheepish sip of her tea. The boy resembled Xiao Jiming, but without his father's refined and easygoing nature. He didn't smile often, and when he kept his little face straight, he appeared particularly solemn. How old is he at this point? Who does he take after? Liu Yizhi muttered ruefully. On the other side of the room, Shen Zichuan had taken his seat with Xiao Qie to his left and Yao Wenyu to his right. To the left of Xiao Qie were men from Li Bei, and to the right of Yao Wenyu were men from Qidong. The contingent from Zhongbo was the fewest in number, but they had an outsized presence that proved impossible to overlook. I know, little emo boy. A nice time to remember all the times Tse-an promised Lanzhou he'd take him to meet his family for New Year's. Oh, I can't think about that now. Also, I was just thinking of them as, like, the little gay trifecta. Zhongbo has 3 prefectures it has yet to reclaim, Qi Juyin said to Shen Zichuan. We hope the prefectural governor can complete the reunification of Zhongbo before winter next year. If the marshal is willing to go easy on Fanzhou and Dengzhou, Shen Zichuan said, I'd naturally be happy to oblige. I can't make any promises, Qi Juyin smiled. My hands are tied if Chudu commands me to crush King Yi. Yao Wenyu understood. It wasn't that she was truly helpless. She hoped to use King Yi to extort next year's military provisions from Shen Zichuan so she could make preparations for an attack on the Qingshu tribe. The fact that the marshal is now sitting in Libei, Wen remarked placidly, means abandoning the expedition against King Yi is merely a matter of a few words. The battle lines in the north and south were soon to be integrated into one. Qi Juyin had turned a deaf ear to all Chudu's deployment orders so far, one after another. If she were truly afraid, she wouldn't have come to Libei at all. But how could Qi Juyin resist taking a stab at fleecing Shen Zichuan? She was dirt poor. No, that's fair. You gotta get money somehow. I came to Libei in secret. It's not the same as directly defying a ruler's commands, Qi Juyin said. Your Cizhou has been a hive of activity this year. If I delay marching on King Yi any longer, your military drill grounds will be set up right at the entrance of Dancheng. The title prefectural governor is interesting too. The way I see it, it's no different from King Yi. That's a gross misunderstanding, Shen Zichuan smiled. From Chazhou to Duanzhou, we've done everything by the book. How remarkable could the title of prefectural governor be? Nothing in the current laws and regulations suggests it's inappropriate. I'm merely a guest of Cizhou's prefect. He was making the most of a clever loophole. By not establishing himself under his own banner, he could not be said to have risen in revolt. In truth, Cizhou had long since broken from Chudu's governance. Chudu simply hadn't dared to issue an official notice. One reason was that they feared Cizhou really would ally itself with Libei in a moment of desperation and try to take over Dancheng. Another was that they feared other regions would follow suit. Yet, owing to their internal strife, Chudu hadn't shown any intention of offering amnesty to Shen Zichuan if he once again pledged loyalty to the emperor. As a result, all Qi Juyin had to threaten Shen Zichuan with at the moment was King Yi. Had this threat been made a month ago, Shen Zichuan would have been hard-pressed to deal with it. But now, among all those present tonight, he was the linchpin in the establishment of the north-south battle line. Silver and grain had become his greatest playing cards, and he planned to exchange his hand for maximum benefits. In the same way Qi Juyin wanted to fleece him, he similarly wanted to fleece Qi Juyin. Han Jin is still in your hands, Qi Juyin said. Cizhou is guilty based on this alone. Han Jin. Shen Zichuan tested the name in his mouth. There was no trace of fear in his eyes. Who can say if he's in my hands? This was why Qi Juyin was so loath to visit Chudu. Dealing with seasoned schemers like Shen Zichuan was exhausting. These people talked in circles without making an inch of progress, passing the buck back and forth until everyone was at the end of their rope. Yeah, we know that he's good at doing that. She was reminded of the feeling she had whenever she demanded money from the Ministry of Revenue. Even if I ignore Fanzhou and Dengzhou and let you gobble them up, what of Duanzhou? Qi Juyin argued, changing tack. You have less than 40,000 soldiers at your disposal, 20,000 of which are new recruits. An army like that can't be ready to recapture Duanzhou from the Biansha horsemen. By this, she meant for Shen Zichuan to plead with Qidong to lend them troops. But Xiaoqie was next to pipe up. I'll head over to Duanzhou by the second month at the latest. Although Zhongbo doesn't require Qidong's assistance at the moment, the ability of the Qidong garrison troops to deal a blow to the Qingshu tribe has a direct bearing on the battlefields of the north, Wen Yu continued. As such, Cizhou is willing to share the marshal's burden. Before coming to Libei, the prefectural governor considered the issue of military provisions for the marshal. If Chudu dares to cut off the marshal's supplies, then half of Qidong's provisions next year will be furnished by Hezhou. Wen Yu had chosen his words carefully. When Shen Zichuan was fleecing Yan Heru the sheep in Duanzhou, Yan Heru had committed to shouldering the burden of Qidong's military provisions. Shen Zichuan had taken out a part of it and ordered Yan Haru to think of a way to make up the shortfall. What Yao Wenyu said could be considered truth. They had simply elided some key details to erase Yan Haru from the picture. Yan Haru the sheep. Oh no, Vase, are you behind? Like, on the streams? Also, reading some of this is making me realize that I need to go back and reread, like, the last couple of streams to, catch up on some of the strategizing that's happening. Knowing Shen Zichuan aimed to take a coin from every purse they came across, Yao Wenyu continued after a moment's pause. However, the marshal is correct. Zhongbo has only 36,000 soldiers, a negligible number compared to both parties present. But Duanzhou is Zhongbo's eastern gate. If it's not shut tight, there's no way we can cut off Bianxa's supply lines. Not to mention the risk that the enemy will use this opening to erode Zhongbo from within. If they cut the northern battlegrounds entirely off from the south, they'll be able to surround Libei completely. So, Qi Juyin thought. Sure enough, Yao Wenyu continued. So we hope to establish a road that directly links Libei to Qidong next year, and to obtain some pointers regarding the regimentation of military camps. Regimentation of military camps was a subtle way of putting it. What he clearly meant was that Shen Zichuan would like Qidong's commanding generals to help them train a garrison next year, one capable of marching into battle on behalf of Zhongbo. Libei was all cavalry, while the garrison troops of Zhongbo were all infantry. He could only ask Qidong for help in this matter. The request revealed considerable ambition on his part. Everyone in attendance sensed as much. Shen Zichuan did not want to rely on the Libei armored cavalry, or simply borrow soldiers from Qidong. He sought to establish his own forces and restore Zhongbo's line of defense in the east. Everyone sighed with emotion. Money truly made the Lord. The silver for military provisions alone, coupled with the expenses of equipment, establishing and maintaining the road, rebuilding cities, and so on, all of it would add up to several million taels within a year. In the past, Chudu had come up with all kinds of excuses to push this off, begging poverty. Yet here Shen Zichuan was getting down to business right off the bat. Also, regarding the cavalry the prefectural governor and his lordship discussed previously, Yao Wenyu went on, turning to Xiao Jiming. Will Libei still be able to supply battle steeds at the start of spring next year? They were losing trained war horses on the front lines at an unprecedented rate. If Libei couldn't spare any horses when the pastures sprang to life at the start of spring, Shen Zichuan had already indicated they could postpone this part of their agreement. Yes, but Zhongbo will have to let us use Mount Luo as a stable, Xiao Jiming replied without batting an eye. This was Xiao Jiming's plan. The only general under Xiao Qia's direct command was Tan Tai Hu, and stationing him in Duanzhou as he had was equivalent to giving him to Shen Zichuan. When Xiao Qia rode for Duanzhou in the second month, it would be inconvenient for him to receive fresh battle steeds all the way from border camp. But if Libei were to establish new stables on Mount Luo, it would not only ease the strain on border camp in transporting supplies, but also allow Libei to establish a minor defensive presence in Zhongbo, even if Duanzhou should fall, or if Shen Zichuan should turn against Xiao Qia. Libei wouldn't be entirely without recourse. I'm just like... they don't know. That's not going to happen. Is Duanzhou establishing a cavalry of its own? Asked Lu Guangbai. Shen Zichuan was still ruminating over the specific uses of this cavalry. He merely answered, giving a light cavalry a try. We'll decide on the specifics once we have the battle steeds next year. Does General Lu plan to remain on the northern battlegrounds? Lu Guangbai nodded. Right now, what Libei needs is time. My troops can hold off Hassan's scimitars on the battlefields here, and I'm intrigued by those scorpions. In that case, I have a request as well. Qi Juyin said. If Lu Guangbai will be staying in the north, in exchange, I want Xiao Jie to head down to the southern battlegrounds in the 6th month next year and take command of the Bianjun Commandery on my behalf. Okay. Okay, that's interesting. Xiao Jie was taken aback. Qi Juyin tapped the table and said nothing more. But Xiao Jiming and Lu Guangbai both understood. Qi Juyin was giving Xiao Jie his chance. Why, Henry, it translated you saying, hello? It just turned it into, hey? Like, I don't think hello is a real word in any language. This is the gay lesbian alliance they spoke of in the olden days. I'm gonna read that again. Qi Juyin was giving Xiao Jie his chance. This is interesting. Okay. So, she's obviously not at the point of being able to trust Shen Zichuan yet, which is totally fair. And she's also, like, she's also got no money, so she kind of has to do whatever she can to try to, like, get any advantage at all. But she's, like, giving Xiao Jie a chance to, like, command his own troops, like, for real. Oh, Vase, you put me on chipmunk mode for a few minutes. Yep, sometimes you gotta do that. So, right, the disrespect, Blue. Henry, stop dequirking me, YouTube. They really need to stop. I need to figure out if this is happening to other people, and if it's a setting I can turn off. I see that there's art on the next page. On the banks of the Chasha River, the heavens had blessed the Liao Ying tribe with a man named Amor. They then bestowed upon Amor a son with extraordinary talent. Father and son had propelled the Biancha horsemen to prominence along the riverbanks, relying on their strategies and scimitars to break the Zhou Empire. At this moment, perhaps Amor thought the stage well set to usher in an era that belonged to the Biancha people. He saw the curtains rising on a new world. Biancha would bid farewell to the pain and suffering of trudging barefoot through the snowstorm. After enduring so many trials, they were finally ready to leave their barren lands and establish their own destiny on fertile soil. That winter, the eastern and western territories of the Zhou Empire were thoroughly split. The lands Shen Zichuan claimed barred Chudu's access to both the eastern and northern borders. He had spent half a year completing this wall, bridging the northern and southern battlefronts through the tattered mess that was Zhongbo. Though he had yet to point his sword directly at Chudu, the scales of power had tilted, exposing an inkling of his ambitions. This year, Li Bei lit no lanterns or firecrackers, but the New Year's festivities were not entirely absent. Shen Zichuan got to enjoy a New Year's Eve dinner. While trying to stay up to greet the turn of the year, he drifted off despite himself. Xiao Jie placed a new folding fan and a few copper coins beside his pillow. When Shen Zichuan stirred, half asleep, Xiao Jie stroked his hair, lulling him back into slumber. Is this the art we're getting, guys? Oh no, that's not the art we're getting. Okay, well, we'll get back to that. Deep in the night, Xiao Jie stripped off his shirt. What? What? I'm sorry. I need to... I know the art was kind of a spoiler, but I didn't really register what it actually was, so it's okay. But now I'm seeing the words. Let me try that again. Deep in the night, Xiao Jie stripped off his shirt. His entire back was occupied by a tattooed wolf, which spanned from his left shoulder all the way to his waist. All the howls of rage and anguish that had torn him apart were engraved here in ink. This wolf was not perfect. The space that should have been its left eye was reserved for the injury on the back of his shoulder. It looked as though it had been gouged out, making the creature appear all the more ferocious. Xiao Jie couldn't forget the humiliation he'd suffered in that heavy snow. Hassan was right. Everyone ought to return the favor. An eye for an eye. I say, Blue, don't say it's also pretty cringe, not gonna lie. No, that's cool. Because, like, maybe nowadays it would be cringe. But I feel like at this moment, it's okay. I think it's cool. Alright, we're gonna look at the art. I didn't have Xiao Qie getting a tattoo on my bingo card, but this is like a huge, massive tattoo. Like, this isn't just like a normal tattoo. No, it's the edginess of it all. No, I get it. But oh my god. Okay. Well, that was unexpected. Also, wait. Something earlier in the chat. Henry, you were like testing out the translator thing? Where did that go? Oh, where did the comment go? Hold on. I need to see all the messages. YouTube. Anyway, I don't know. Oh yeah, you said testing hello, Mr. Obama, and that did not do the translation thing. I know. What? It's okay. It didn't. It only translates it sometimes. I don't understand the logic. Blue thinks Hua Chung is too edgy to be hot. Yeah, well, you know what? I've only read 2 of those books, so what can I say? I don't know. We're on page 75 for chapter 192. The Snow Beckons. The new year had hardly begun before Zhongbo was hit by a blizzard. The sudden onslaught of snow led to houses collapsing under its weight throughout all 6 prefectures. Fortunately, the roads had been repaired just before the new year, so communication between Suzhou and its neighbors Chazhou and Dunzhou went on uninterrupted. Luo Mu and Tantai Hu promptly reported the casualties, and were well on their way to dealing with the situation before morning, mitigating the worst of the damage caused by the snowstorm. Shen Zichuan got no rest either. He and the advisors stayed in the study all night discussing disaster relief. You know, there's something interesting that I've noticed about this novel, is like I don't really remember reading other like Danmei or seeing media that has to do with like palace politics or anything sort of vaguely similar where they deal with like disaster relief so much, but it's just like a realistic thing of like it's gonna happen. And like we had the flooding of the ditches and everyone getting sick, and then we have this, and I'm just like, I like how in the weeds we get in the details in this series, because I feel like in another author's hands it could just be like uninteresting, but instead I'm like, no, I want to know more about that actually. Don't tell me I lost my place. Okay. Suzhou suffered brutal snowstorms the year before last. So even before the first snow this year, the Yemen's been keeping a close eye on our grain reserves. Zhou Gui flipped through the report on the table. But the reinforcement of residential dwellings is indeed a problem. We cannot continue cobbling together solutions only when the houses collapse every year. But where will the money for this extra expense come from? Kong Ling cut in from the seat opposite him. There's nothing left to spare this year after the military expenditures. Shen Zichuan, occupying the center seat, had pinched the center of his brows until the skin turned pink. His head was spinning. On the other side of the partition, there was a ceaseless clacking of abacus beads from the shop assistants who had been transferred from the shops in Hezhou and Jueshi to help with the accounts. Charcoal braziers had been set up in the study to ward off the bitter chill of the past few days, but with so many people crammed inside, the air had grown unbearably stuffy after a few hours. The war is of utmost importance, said Shen Zichuan. We can't skimp on military expenses. Allocate money from the taxes and duties the merchants paid last year. This period before spring is but a brief hurdle, Yao Wenyu assured him. As long as we can survive these 3 months, things will take a turn for the better once the snow melts. The coarse tea the merchants obtained from Libei's trade market is selling well at the port of Yongyi, so we can increase the commercial tax on it accordingly this year. Shen Zichuan used the edge of his folding fan to push aside his cup of cooled tea. If we're to keep the copper mines in Jueshi operational, we'll have to deal with the Provincial Administration Commission of Jueshi at some point. How smoothly things go after spring this year will depend on how Chudu decides to play their hand. Jiang Qingshan, the official overseeing Jueshi, was well acquainted with all business dealings within the territory. If Chudu ordered him to choke off Zizhou's northwestern tea trade route, it would indeed be a blow. On the bright side, said Kongling, rubbing his knees, the auspicious snow augurs a good harvest. For our 3 prefectures, yes, but the commoners in Fanzhou and Dengzhou will suffer. Shen Zichuan had been ruminating over the problem of Fanzhou more and more frequently these days. King Yi seized all the granaries within the 2 prefectures for himself before the turn of the year. Many starved to death even before the snowstorm. I spent nights tossing and turning over this problem. If we're planning to pit our troops against Duanzhou in the 2nd month, Zhou Gui said, it'd be best to deal with Fanzhou and Dengzhou as soon as possible. The Zizhou garrison troops had only 20,000 soldiers. The troops in Duanzhou brought them to 30,000 in total. If they faced the Biansha horsemen in Duanzhou in the 2nd month, while splitting their attention to keep an eye on King Yi, there would be a gap in Zizhou's defenses. Should the 8 great battalions sneak over from Dancheng at the same time, they would be truly overwhelmed. Now is the time to take down Fanzhou. Yao Wenyu brushed aside the foam in his tea. The commoners of Fanzhou have long voiced their discontent with King Yi's insatiable greed. Someone will topple him before long. Why not make the first move and issue an official declaration of war? Kongling, who preferred a steadier approach, furrowed his brow at the idea. This situation is different from the so-called bandit suppression a year ago. We've now reached an agreement with the battlefields to the north and south. If we issue a declaration of war, and King Yi refuses to surrender, we'll be giving Chudu the excuse they need to deploy their troops. Mr. Chongfeng has a point, but since the prefectural governor took his title before the new year, there's no benefit in maintaining a veneer of peace with Chudu. Yao Wenyu, who had yet to take even a sip of his tea, looked at Shen Zichuan. In my opinion, Chudu won't dare dispatch troops now, even if given legitimate cause to do so. But Kongling remained concerned. If we openly rebel, it's bound to impact our business in Jueshi this year. All else aside, if Jiang Qingshan takes the opportunity to shut down the Shi clan's copper mines, won't we lose more than we stand to gain? Your lordship, in my humble opinion, the better tactic would be to send troops to Fanzhou surreptitiously. His lordship's occupation of Zhongbo is as inexorable as it is widely known, Yao Wenyu countered. Even without a declaration of war, if Jiang Qingshan wishes, he will think of a way to shut down the Shi clan copper mines. Neither man was willing to concede. Shen Zichuan tapped his fan against his fingertips. After a moment, he said, Shenwei, draft the declaration. So every time I see that dang Shenwei, and for a second I'm like, what? They had spent the entire night in conversation in the study. Seeing that the discussion was more or less concluded, Fei Sheng called for the attendants to serve breakfast. Everyone helped themselves to the simple meal and hurried back to rest. They would reconvene that evening to make in-depth plans for the deployment of troops. Exactly, Blue. Now imagine how Shen Zichuan must feel. When Kongling saw Yao Wenyu about to head out, he stepped forward to lift the curtain for him. Yao Wenyu bowed in thanks, and Chao Tianya entered to wheel him away. As everyone filed out of the study, Zhou Gui jogged down the corridor, panting for breath as he called out to Kong Ling. Goodness, oh! Zhou Gui rubbed his chest with one hand and reached out with the other. Chung Feng! Chung Feng! Kong Ling pulled to a halt. Why didn't you stop me earlier if you have something to say? The walkway is slippery. If you fall and break a bone now, you'll be on bed rest for 100 days. Panting for breath, Zhou Gui flapped a hand. I could still run a mile or more along the farm fields the year before last, but I've got to admit defeat this year. The storms of life and strife do make one age prematurely. Why are you in such a rush? Kong Ling pulled his fur collar closer around his neck to keep out the biting wind. Is it about what happened earlier? It's been so long since I last enjoyed the snow with you, Zhou Gui said, clumsily deflecting the question. My wife has been keeping a close eye on me these days, and I've been looking after my grandson all day inside. Why not come out with me today? Kong Ling sighed. You'd do better not to try to be as furtive as the others. He drew his hands into his sleeves and turned his back to the wind before continuing. There's no need to persuade me. I won't change my opinion. Still, don't let this breed any resentment between you and Yuan Zhuo. Do you take me for a child? Kong Ling walked side by side with him. That Yuan Zhuo can speak so frankly shows he has a clear conscience. Some differences in political views are inevitable. Mindless echoing is much more worrisome. I understand that, as does Yuan Zhuo. Given that the prefectural governor didn't seek us out for a private discussion, clearly that's his stance on the matter as well. Zhou Gui had been castigating himself ever since the incident with Gao Zhongxiong, in which the scholar had been mistreated by members of the Yamen under Zhou Gui's own administration. He no longer dared to make big decisions on his own. He always asked Shen Zichuan before taking action. During recent discussions, he had reminded the advisors below him not to grow smug or complacent, fearing they would clash next with Yao Wenyu. Zhou Gui watched as the broken branch of a withered willow tree in the courtyard was blown into the snow and over to the far wall of the yard. That's an interesting image. Having caught his breath, he said dispiritedly, I'm just afraid it will exchange us from... Water that's too clear... I can read. Water that's too clear begets no fish. Kong Ling raised a hand to brush snow from his hair. He schooled his expression to seriousness. Is there any hall of government in the world that's truly transparent? You've been the prefect of Cizhou all these years. You know the upper and lower echelons both have their twists and turns. Vices like corruption and bribery are everywhere. They can never be fully rooted out. You've done well managing it in previous years. Don't you think the prefectural governor sees that? From start to finish, he's never blamed you or treated you worse because of it. Killing those two advisors was a reminder to you, not a warning. Your tiptoeing around him and excessive caution will only serve as a constant reminder to him. The governance of one's subordinates was a delicate dance, as was deference to one's superiors. Zhou Gui walked a few steps in silence, then said despondently, Years ago, my father-in-law was reluctant to recommend me for an official post in the capital because he thought I wasn't cut out for it. I have a rather blunt sense when it comes to certain matters, and have no choice but to fumble my way through by trial and error. It's too difficult. You've done nothing against your conscience, so what are you so terrified of? Kong Ling shook his head slightly. You needn't go so out of your way to yield to Yuan Zhuo either. Yuan Zhuo, the prefectural governor, they're both intelligent men whose sharp eyes see through everything. How did you think these little concessions of yours would escape their notice? If you keep this up, you'll only create a genuine rift. Interesting. Water that's too close to Chuaning begets suicidal fish. Alas, it is true. The wind picked up as Shen Zichuan made his way back to his residence. Fei Sheng held up an umbrella to shield him. but Shen Zichuan's overcoat flapped in the wind all the same. Turning his back to the gale, Fei Sheng said, "Master, we should get a sedan, too." Shen Zichuan could barely open his eyes in the wind, and the cold had already turned the tips of his ears red. "It's only a few steps. What would we need a sedan for?" "But it's freezing," Fei Sheng thought. He was worried those so-called few steps would make Shen Zichuan ill yet again. Fei Sheng had been exceedingly careful these past few days, both indoors and out, hanging thick, heavy curtains in the doorway, and even around the veranda under the eaves. When the attendants crossed the threshold, they were instructed to tuck the curtain tight around the door frame to keep out the draft. For prudence's sake, the furnace that circulated warm air beneath the floors was also kept burning at all hours. When they finally made it through the main entrance, Ding Tao sprang out from the side room where he'd been waiting. Li Xiong followed, and the two positioned themselves in front of Shen Zichuan like a living wall. As they shuffled along, Shen Zichuan said, a little exasperated, "Stop this. Inside, both of you. All you're getting standing out here is a draft of bitter wind. It won't be long before you both get sick." Ding Tao had grown taller again in recent days. Master's instruction was to shield you so no draft can pass through, or he's gonna beat me. He patted Li Xiong and shouted against the wind, "Big Bear, move faster." By the time Shen Zichuan reached the veranda, his cloak was sodden with snow. It felt heavy and wet around his neck, so he unfastened the ties. Fei Sheng hastened to take it from him and called for a maidservant to hang it up to dry. In the next moment, he was reaching to drape a new cloak over Shen Zichuan, but Shen Zichuan simply strode ahead without a glance back. Fei Sheng had been in a state of elation since receiving the assignment to recruit new soldiers back in Dunzhou. Upon his return, he was even happy to see Chao Tianya again. While Shen Zichuan was away in Libei for the new year, Fei Sheng had remained at home with Ji Gang, furthering his understanding of the Ji clan's boxing style and doing whatever Ji Gang asked of him. Now that Shen Zichuan had returned, Fei Sheng was like a mother hen, taking meticulous care of him in every way possible. The Marquis is busy on the battlefield now. Fei Sheng was all too aware of this as he followed a few steps behind Shen Zichuan. So long as the prefectural governor didn't fall sick, the Marquis would be happy too. And so long as the Marquis was happy, his good humor would extend to Fei Sheng. They were all going to be working together now, so Fei Sheng figured Xiaoqia would have to recognize him eventually. Shen Zichuan entered the main hall and huffed warmth into his hands as he took his seat. Fei Sheng said, "Master, the medicine has been simmering over the stove. Will you drink it now?" He certainly didn't want to. He hadn't been ill for the past few days, and was growing concerned he might get a nosebleed from overnourishment with all these herbs and tonics. Moreover, no one aside from Ding Tao kept candies at the ready to chase the bitterness. Thus, Shen Zichuan continued to flip through the documents on his table as if he hadn't heard. Whoa, where's the death-defying loyalty to Shen Zichuan you developed last volume? Was that not Fei Sheng? I thought it was Fei Sheng. I think he's trying to, like, not acknowledge the fact to himself that he, like, is loyal to Shen Zichuan. He's, like, still trying to make it about Xiaoqia, but I don't know. I feel like because, like, he's the one who, like, did not like Shen Zichuan at first. And he's definitely come so far from that, so I don't know. Met with no response, Fei Sheng hovered in silence. After a short interval, he spoke up again. "Master, the medicine." Shen Zichuan glanced up at him, his narrowed eyes betraying his thinning patience. Fei Sheng pretended not to comprehend the meaning of that look. The medicine was a sticking point for both Xiaoqia and Ji Gang, neither of whom Shen Zichuan could afford to cross. "Fine," Shen Zichuan said, relenting. "Bring it over." Fei Sheng didn't need to be told twice. He stepped out at once to fetch the medicine. But a moment later, it was Chao Tianya who lifted the curtain. "Yan Haru is here." Curtain raised, Chao Tianya turned to glance behind him. I saw that babbling brat running toward Yuan Zhuo, making a ruckus, so I brought him over here instead. Shen Zichuan dipped his brush in ink. He's here to give us money. Treat him with a little more courtesy. They were still speaking when a figure darted in under the drapes. Yan Heru was decked out from head to toe in new brocade robes of vivid red, trimmed everywhere with gold thread and embroidered with patterns of, unsurprisingly, gold ingots. No, that's so funny. He actually has embroidery of gold ingots on his robes? That's... I've never, like, seen or read that before in a Danmei, in like a C-drama. Like, no matter how, like, dramatic and rich the, like, some noble or emperor is, I've never seen that before. That's so funny. On the string around his neck hung a brand new abacus, so heavy it left a red mark where the cord pressed into the skin at the back of his neck. Even so, he couldn't bear to take it off. The young man's face was soft and fair, and his eyes curved into crescents as he exclaimed, I'm here to extend my first greetings of the year to your lordship. Happy New Year. I would have come to pay my respects earlier, but it turns out you were in Li Bei. See, the moment you came back, I rushed right over. Not only have I got some choice gems and jades for the marquis, I also brought your lordship a number of pretty little Fei Sheng, who had come up behind Yan Heru with the bowl of medicine, locked eyes with Chao Tianya across the threshold. Chao Tianya immediately pushed Yan Heru's head down with one broad palm to shut him up. Okay, we're gonna look at the art. Here he is again. I guess he's become an important character. I guess he is a recurring character now. I mean, they need him for money, so... He's wearing the equivalent of a $sign gold necklace. Exactly. Oh my goodness. Oh, that's so funny. Li Bei was deep in mourning, and Suzhou had not hung any elaborate decorations along its streets for this year's festivities either. Both Shen Zichuan and Xiaoqia had donned plain clothes of rough fabric. Shen Zichuan had even removed his jade earring for the mourning period. Who could have expected the first words out of Yan Heru's mouth to be so insufferable? He was practically asking for a beating. Shen Zichuan wrote, "Rejected," on the paper that sat before him, and didn't spare Yan Heru a glance. Well... That's the end. Yeah, I didn't even think about that at first. Like, this outfit in a period of grief, it's so tasteless. He did not think. That is the end of the chapter. Oh, don't lose my page. So, we're on... Hold on. How many chapters am I reading? Yeah, okay. We're on page 87 for chapter 193, which is called Wary. Also, pretty little... Okay, so he was cut off. He was going to say, I brought your lordship a number of pretty little B-O something. I'm not actually sure what he was going to say, but then it says... Yan Heru corrected course at the last minute. Pretty little baubles. What was he going to say? Am I missing something? I'm missing something obvious. Like bottles of something? Like what? I don't know what he was going to say. How good of you to have prepared a gift. Only then did Shen Zichuan set down his brush. Show young Master Yan to a seat. Pretty little... boys? Could that... As in building Shen Zichuan a harem? I don't know. I don't think he would have said that, but... Wait, are y'all having a moment because Fei Sheng is attractive? Is that what this is about? Sure. Why not? Henry is having a moment because Fei Sheng is attractive. Yeah, right. I mean, the part of the thing is the Danmei, and the Danmei artist thing is kind of to make practically everyone look attractive. Unless they're specifically written in the text as unattractive. Otherwise, they get to be, like, super hot. How good of you to have prepared a gift. Only then did Chen Zichuan set down his brush. Show young Master Yan to a seat. Chao Tianya removed his hand, and Fei Sheng ushered Yan Heru in, saying, Quickly now, some tea for young Master Yan. Yan Heru had suffered an enormous financial loss this time. He had carefully selected a number. He had... Oh, hold up. Wait. Is this... I'm not sure if this reveals what he was going to say. He had carefully selected a number of exceedingly good-looking boys and girls from Cui Qing. He'd originally intended to get on Yao Wenyu's good side by letting him have first pick, and thus pave the way for his dealings with Chen Zichuan. But he'd been denied so much as a glimpse of Yao Wenyu's face. On entering this courtyard, he'd then thought to give them to Chen Zichuan again. So he did mean boys. After all, what kind of man didn't love a pretty little thing? It wasn't as if Xiao Er was some otherworldly beauty that put flowers to shame. You like men, right? Here's some men. Rubbing the back of his head, Yan Heru marked Chao Tianya down in his book of grudges, then lifted the hem of his robes to take his seat. He still wore an amiable expression, but his smile was more restrained now. Ah, the Prince of Libe was really a legend of our age. Who doesn't know of his amazing feats on the battlefield, no? I was simply worried the prefectural governor and marquis would be overcome with grief. If you got sick from it, you would be staining the memory of the late prince, who cared so much for his children. See, that's why I rushed over here playing the boor, to coax a smile out of the governor. My deepest condolences, your lordship. Yan Heru spoke the official dialect with a hint of Huzhou accent. He couldn't seem to shed his habit of adding si, yes, no, and other little interjections, which made his speech sweet and childlike. When he spoke those words of comfort in his lilting tone, he sounded almost genuine. Shen Zichuan accepted his kindness. After all, he had accrued massive expenses all over the territory this past year and was depending on Yan Heru for all of them. Shen Zichuan let Yan Heru speak while he took the medicine from Fei Sheng and drank a few sips. Expression gentle, he said, When I was in Libe, I heard you aided border camp with tens of thousands of silver taels to build their roads. Ah, that was chump change, Yan Heru said. Nothing for the governor to worry about. Besides, we're all on the same side now, yes? Everything Libe and Shidong do is for the sake of fighting those Biansha Baldies. I'm just a little merchant who can't help any other way. Consider it a small gesture of my goodwill. Fei Sheng scoffed to himself. This lad was as good as Fei Sheng himself at pretending to be a decent human being. Here he was going on and on about being on the same side, yet he hadn't shown the slightest twinge of guilt back in Dunzhou when he and his merchants were discovered trading with Biansha. Wait. Did I? Oh, I accidentally gave Yan Heru the gay accent, and I think it fit him so offensively well. Oh no. Shen Zichuan finished his medicine and said after a moment's pause, Was there a particular reason for your visit today? Now I'm gonna want to read his voice that way. I don't normally think that hard about, like, giving a voice to specific characters. Like, it takes up too much bandwidth for me to, like, perform a bunch of different voices, but now I'm going to be thinking about that. Okay. I just wanted to see for myself that your lordship is well, that's all. Once again, Yan Haru flashed a smile. Your lordship is like my own brother. If I go a day without clapping eyes on you, I miss you like crazy. Even as the words rolled off his tongue, he impulsively straightened in his seat and said, You know, maybe your lordship would take me as your younger brother. I can get down and kowtow to you now. Shameless creature that he was, Yan Haru had addressed Cai Yu as Pa and Lei Chongming as Daga, and he even called Lei Jingzhe nephew whenever he saw him. Now that the game had changed and Shen Zichuan was in control of the board, he hoped to slide into position as Shen Zichuan's little brother. So what if it meant being his subservient hanger-on, his lowly minion? All of that was insignificant compared to money. Yan Haru saw that more clearly than anyone. Sure. Noting Yan Haru's good mood, Shen Zichuan humored him. Kowtow twice to Shen Wei, and will be part of the same clan. Yan Haru almost spat on the ground. He was no fool. Any association with Shen Wei would be an instant blow to his reputation. He would be cursed in both the east and west. He beat a hasty retreat. Oh, never mind. My family's got rules. Kowtowing to Shen Wei is out of the question. After a beat, he turned to Shen Zichuan again, dragging out his words. Your lordship. Hey, your lordship. Yan Haru perked up. Well, since I'm here, I have something else to discuss with you. Qidong has come to an agreement with our Zhou, right? There'll be no problem with the marshal's military provisions this year. I'll take care of it. All of it. Shen Zichuan took a sip of tea to rinse his mouth, in no hurry to respond. Sure enough, Yan Haru prattled on. Chudu fears you now. You're surrounded by powerful military forces. If you really came to blows with the capital, how would the 8 great battalions stand a chance? But it's unlikely they'll just take it lying down. I'm thinking Chudu will cut off our trade with Jueshi this year. At the very least, they'll try to take the Shi clan's copper mines and fleet of merchant ships off your hands. The Shi clan's ships in the port of Yongyi were essential to Suzhou's business with the Huiyan tribe at Libei's trade market. The coarse tea Shen Zichuan's people brought there was worth nothing in Jueshi. The Shen Zichuan's people bought there was worth nothing in Jueshi. A profit could only be made by shipping it overseas. Yan Haru cared not a bit about the seizure of the Shi clan's properties. Those weren't his shops or his ships. What concerned him was the loss of the Yan clan's grain business in Zhongbo. He had to find something to fill this void, and he had his eye on the port. What did you have in mind? Shen Zichuan set down the lid of his teacup. Out with it. Yan Haru plopped his elbows down on the table. I think we should let them have the port of Yongyi. Fingers resting on the teacup lid, Shen Zichuan glanced up. Yan Haru's eyes gleamed with ambition. Shen Zichuan didn't reply immediately. He sat patiently, and within a few moments, he had figured out Yan Haru's plan. Yan Haru blinked coyly. We can always build a new one, no? The Yan clan of Hezhou occupied the inland waterways throughout the south of the Zhou Empire, which allowed them to do business all over the land. But once their goods arrived in Jueshi, they had to hand them over to the Shi clan's fleet at the port of Yongyi for trading overseas. The lion's share of the profits from this trade route went not into Yan Haru's pockets, but Shi Hongshuan's, or rather now Shen Zichuan's. Yan Haru had been attempting to cozy up to Shen Zichuan all this while, making all kinds of brazen offers to collaborate, because he saw the consolidation of trade routes all over the country. Shen Zichuan moved quickly. If Yan Haru wished to compete, he had to keep up. For Yan Haru, the threat of Jueshi seizing the copper mines and shutting down the port of Yongyi was a golden opportunity to gain some ground. When Yan Haru had first ventured up north a few years ago, He'd faced a number of setbacks. Li Bei refused to do business with him, so he'd established a smaller trade market in Duanzhou and made use of the brokerage to launder money for officials from all over the land. It was the same now, and he was just as gutsy as he'd been then. Giving up the port of Yongyi meant the Shi clan would no longer obstruct the Yan clan in the west. Yan Heru wanted firm control over both inland and overseas water routes, so he could stand on equal footing with Shen Zichuan in these turbulent times. Shen Zichuan brushed the edge of the lid with his fingertips as he contemplated. How are you going to get around Jiang Qingshan? Why would I need to when your lordship has so much leverage against Juexi's officials in your hands? Yan Heru grinned boyishly, revealing his sharp little canines. Remember all those merchants who traveled to Duanzhou to launder money on behalf of one official or another? Well, there are plenty of officials from Juexi among the names recorded. If the brokerage's account books fall into Jiang Qingshan's hands, there'll be hell to pay. That's if the officials make it out alive. I shoveled unbelievable amounts of bribe money into Juexi just to gain access to the market there. Now it's time for me to collect on that debt. There were hundreds of officials and lesser functionaries in any given region. Even if the prefectural governor himself was upright and fair, he couldn't guarantee all the subordinates under him were clean. The administration of cities and prefectures was complex and tedious work, and there were only so many men working the investigating censor circuit. There were blind spots from top to bottom, all of them openings for Yan Heru to exploit. He could do business on such a large scale in Juexi, right next to the Shi clan, because the men on the local government's payroll were his own personal subjects who had successfully protected him. Now those same men would become the stepping stones that paved his way forward. Shen Zichuan found himself re-evaluating Yan Heru yet again. The young man had been shameless from the moment they'd met in Duanzhou. Even when Shen Zichuan had continued to give him the cold shoulder, he'd persisted with the broad smile. It was easy to forget he was the helmsman of the Yan clan of Hezhou, the same family that had profited tremendously from the Zhongbo tragedy just a few years ago. He'd been quick to cast Lei Jingzhe aside, and had even been willing to trap and kill him in Duanzhou just to win Shen Zichuan over. No matter how sweetly Yan Heru addressed someone, he wouldn't waver for a moment when it came to taking their life. He was truly a money grubber, famous for his refusal to go out without a golden carriage. He wouldn't even show his face at the bargaining table if the party sitting across from him didn't have enough to offer. Liuzhou, out along the coast, is the perfect place. It's pretty remote, and it lies quite a ways from the port of Yongyi. What's more, it has a crescent-shaped bay, so the ships won't be exposed to the open sea. As long as we can keep Yo Tan, Liuzhou's prefect, quiet, we're in business. Yan Heru rapped his golden abacus. Make good use of the records from the brokerage, and the merchants we send through Juexi won't need to pay taxes to Jiang Qingshan. When that happens, your lordship can have final say over the tariffs and inland commercial tax. Once you reign supreme and take all 13 cities of Juexi, these corrupt officials can be my little housewarming present. Wash the land in their blood, and then we'll see who still dares take bribes on your watch. I just want to look for a second and see if this port is on the map. Because you know that they're updating the map every single book. Did he say Liuzhou? Okay. I don't think it is. Anyway, I just wanted to I just wanted to check, because when I go back, if I reread something, if something is like too complicated for me and I basically forget everything I read during the stream, I reread it and I look at the map and it actually helps me a lot. He wanted to drain every last drop from this resource and dispense with it the second it was no longer useful. Yan Heru hadn't even come of age, yet he was already well acquainted with the words ruthless and merciless. Sporting that innocent face, he clacked away on his little abacus. What he calculated out was not just money, but lives. Yes, he's vicious, but it's a different kind of vicious from Shen Zichuan. You are correct, Blue. He's like, and it's like, you think about what Shen Zichuan is willing to do, and it's like, yeah, that man is vicious, but Yan Heru, like, feels a lot slimier. Shen Zichuan had no reason to reject Yan Heru's proposal. Indeed, he needed a new port if he hoped to go around Jiangqingshan. He wasn't willing to concede the copper mines either. All his expenses were increasing this year due to the war. By the time he recovered the remaining 3 prefectures of Zhongbo, the bill would no doubt have multiplied again. How far-sighted you are, Shen Zichuan said, affecting wonder. It seems I still can't compare to you in these matters of business. After Yan Heru took his leave, Chao Tianya leaned a hand on the chair's armrest and watched the door's hanging screen fall. Some people need killing. He's resourceful, and he knows how to get on someone's good side. Shen Zichuan also watched the screen sway gently. In time, he'll be more trouble than he's worth. I guess that means they have to kill Yan Heru at some point. Yan Heru strode out of the residence and stepped on his steward's bent back to board his carriage. As the carriage lurched forward, he removed the golden abacus and tossed it onto a satin cushion. Rubbing the back of his neck, he asked, "Have you found Hei Rigu?" A man lifted the curtain and slipped inside. He knelt and said, "Everyone in the Shen Manor keeps their mouths shut tight, and the place is filled with the embroidered uniform guard. I couldn't find any trace of him." I was about to ask, who is this man? But I think they tell us later on the page who the man is. I was like, wait a minute, who? What? Yan Heru rattled the beads on his abacus, vexed. What embroidered uniform guard? A bunch of beggars from Chudu who hung up their hats to become lapdogs in Zizhou. Shen Zichuan is wary of me after I mentioned the port in Liuzhou today. Who knows? He's probably plotting my death right this second. When you're actually correct, he's probably plotting my death right this second. Literally exactly what he was doing. The man, Yan Miao, had come from the brokerage in Duanzhou. He was the son of a servant whose whole family served the Yan clan, and acted as the broker who handled all incoming and outgoing accounts. Yan Heru had stationed him in Duanzhou a few years ago and trusted him immensely. In the dim light, Yan Miao raised his head slightly. From what I can see of Shen Zichuan's activities in Zizhou, he's not as vindictive as the rumors say. The war is urgent now, and both the northern and southern battlefronts are reliant on him for resources. We mustn't act rashly and ruin our relationship with him. He's having me cover 2 prefectures' granaries at the start of spring. Yan Heru flicked the abacus beads back and forth. Is that not a warning? You think he isn't someone who'll seek revenge over small details? Think again. Kong Chongfeng rejected him thrice, yet he never flew into a rage. He's continued to treat him with respect, Yan Miao said. We're supplying grain for 2 prefectures, along with Qidong's military provisions this year. We'll also front the funds and labor for the construction of a new port in the west. He ought to recognize Xiaogong's sincerity. Yan Heru suddenly swept the abacus off his lap. He sat in frustrated silence for a moment before bursting out, "Ah, Miao, you don't get it. Shen Zichuan treats Kongling well because Kongling is willing to work for the good of Zizhou, despite not wanting to answer to Shen Zichuan as a subordinate. It was Kongling who negotiated with Huaizhou at the beginning of autumn, and it was also Kongling who played peacemaker when Shen Zichuan and Zhou Gui's advisors nearly fell out at the end of the year. How else do you think a blockhead like Zhou Gui can remain the prefect of Zizhou? Shen Zichuan is making the most of his resources. He knows that little 2-man team won't turn against him. They'll build an unassailable fortress around Zizhou on his behalf. As for me, If he genuinely wanted to keep me as a partner for the long haul, why would he tolerate his lapdogs barking at me time and time again? He would have said more, but Yan Miao straightened and warned in a low voice. Xiao Gongzi. Yan Heru paused, straining to listen. He caught the clatter of hooves outside the carriage. He retrieved his abacus, then crawled over to the curtain and dropped his voice to a whisper. Who's that? The Libe armored cavalry, Yan Miao answered. A pang of fear shot through Yan Heru. He clutched his abacus to his chest in the swaying carriage. He was just screwing up his courage to take a peek when the carriage came to an abrupt stop. Snowcrest, dark against the blanket of billowing snow, had slowed to a halt alongside the carriage. Xiao Qie cracked his whip, and Chen Yang and the Libe armored cavalry behind him followed suit and halted too. Yan Heru patted his cheeks with both hands, then pulled the carriage curtains open. I thought it might be the second master. I was just thinking of you, he said warmly. Xiao Qie swept a glance over Yan Miao kneeling inside before fixing his gaze on Yan Heru. You've been to see the governor? Yan Heru gulped. He'd heard Xiao Qie had run in the snow for half the night in order to retrieve the Prince of Libe, and that not only did he not freeze to death, he broke the necks of a dozen men when he got there. Yan Heru didn't know if it was because of these rumors, but he felt Xiao Qie's presence suddenly had a new weight to it. The imposing aura that assailed him was so overwhelming he broke into a light sweat. I did, yes. Yan Heru looked as though he was overheating as he dabbed at his forehead. I left some gems and jades for the second master. If you like the look of them, let me know. There are plenty more in Hezhou. Xiao Qie had just come from border camp, and had no desire to engage in idle chatter with Yan Heru, so he merely nodded and left with his men. The Libe armored cavalry swept past like the wind. Only when they were gone did Yan Heru dare to rub his arms and shudder. Recalling something, Yan Miao commented, The second master has been looking for the venerable master Yi Deng for a while now. Is that so? Yan Heru tilted his head to watch the fine spray of snow kicked up by the cavalry. His gaze sharpened, and he said with a smile, But to me, keeping Shen Zichuan sick is a lot better than letting him recover. What? What? Is he, like, hiding the doctor from them? Is he keeping them from finding the doctor that is, like, the acclaimed doctor they need to specifically heal him? Is he messing with his medicine? What does that mean? What does that mean? What is he doing? Oh no, you just said if that renowned doctor dies, I swear I will become the Brat Tamer. If the doctor dies... what? See, Yan Heru, he's, like, kind of an idiot, but he's kind of a, like, conniving genius at the same time, because you're just like, oh, he's fine, we'll deal with him. And then apparently he's doing something... Keeping Shen Zichuan sick is a lot better than letting him recover. Like, what does he get specifically out of keeping Shen Zichuan sick? Is it just easier to make deals with him? Like, what does that mean? What does that do for you? I'm so... I have so many questions now. And that's the end of the chapter. And it's time for me to take a break. And... Oh. If he... Oh, Blue. Like, if his plan is to ingratiate himself to Xiao Qie and let Shen Zichuan die so he can replace him. If he thinks that's gonna happen... Oh, boy. I mean, he could try that, but it's not gonna happen. If he's weak and can't travel as easily, he'll be easier to corner. I guess, yeah, if he can't travel as easily, that does kind of limit, I guess, his power, his reach, something, maybe. He did think that every man likes pretty things. Yeah, I don't know. This is like a development I did not expect. You know, we've been throwing out like, hey, so is Shen Zichuan still taking the stuff that makes him appear weak? You know, for lack of a better term, like the twinkifying potion. That's just kind of how I think of it. Like, is he secretly still taking that? And we've been wondering about that. I know I've been wondering about that. But now it's like, could someone else be messing with his medication or messing with his health in other ways? Great. I didn't think about that. Now that's a possibility. Now that's on the table. And I'm concerned. But yeah, I need to take a break. So I'll be back in about 10 minutes. And when we come back, we will be on chapter 194, which is called Sound Sleep. That could be good or bad. I don't know. Hello, I'm back. Blue, I saw you said, you even called it mild puberty blockers at one point. And along with your theory that it's stopping Shenzachuan from becoming as big as your average scorpion. I'm still like, okay, the scorpions don't have to be Bian-Cha. I don't think Bai-Cha was actually Bian-Cha. But I do still think that he took, even if he's not taking the medication now, he took it longer than he said he did. That's kind of what it feels like to me. But now just everything, I don't know what's happening. I will, like, have some theory about this book, and then it throws in, like, a whole different element that I didn't even think could have happened. And I'm like, well, that really throws a wrench in everything. So... we are on page 97 for chapter 194, which is called Sound Sleep. Yes, he already took it longer than advisable, so even if he stopped when he said he did, it still has lasting effects. Qiao Tianyao remained in the room, waiting for the rest of Shenzachuan's instructions. Tell Yuan Zhuo about the new port in Liuzhou when you go back, Shen Zichuan said. We'll discuss it in detail later. The weather's been cold lately. Keep the underfloor furnaces running. Don't let him fall ill again. More at ease with Shen Zichuan than Fei Sheng was, Qiao Tianya answered simply, I've been keeping an eye on it. Shen Zichuan thought for a moment. Quite a lot of people have come calling this year, seeking a career and future in our court. Ward them off for a few more days until Yuan Zhuo recovers from his illness. You did well today. Yan Heru has ulterior motives. Don't let him in next time either. Qiao Tianya fished out a folded-up booklet from his sleeve and pushed it before Shen Zichuan. That's why I'm here, actually. There are a good number of reputable scholars among those who've come calling. Yuan Zhuo has already gone through them and prepared 2 lists of names. 2? With warm fingertips, Shen Zichuan opened the booklet for a look. This is a list of those you can retain but cannot use. Qiao Tianya gestured at the right side, then the left, while this is a list of those you can retain and use. Shen Zichuan looked over the right-hand list. They were all scholars with good reputations. What Zhongbo most needed at present were practical doers who could see things through. In that regard, few of these were useful to him. Yet these people had come from afar to throw in their lot with Shen Zichuan. For the sake of his own reputation, Shen Zichuan couldn't afford to slight them either. He would have to house them in his manor and keep them on as literary retainers. In contrast, those of use in the left-hand list were nearly all unknowns. We'll need a new cohort this spring, Shen Zichuan said. When the time comes, include the talents Zhou Gui picked out and draw up a list for each prefecture. Shen Zichuan intended to reclaim Zhongbo's remaining 3 prefectures by spring. If they missed the spring plowing, he would have to worry over provisions again at the end of the year. Qiao Tianya acknowledged the order. Upon hearing the tread of footsteps on the walkway outside, he rose and announced with a smile, Arya is back. After Xiao Fengshu's demise, Xiao Jiming had become the Prince of Libei. Calling Xiao Qie Argongzi, second young master, was no longer appropriate. Everyone now addressed him as Arya, the second master after Xiao Jiming, who was now the head of the clan. Xiao Qie paused under the eaves while Chen Yang and Gu Jin relieved him of his cloak. A maid-servant presented a hot handkerchief for him to wipe his hands, and Ding Tao quickly lifted the hanging screen for Xiao Qie to enter. Qiao Tianya and Fei Sheng tactfully made to retreat, but Xiao Qie stopped them. Where's He Rigu? Fei Sheng cast a sidelong glance at Shen Zichuan, answering only when he saw Shen Zichuan's subtle nod. Arya, he's at our Beiyuan training grounds. He bent to take the handkerchief from Xiao Qie as he continued. Master made arrangements for the embroidered uniform guard to do a daily head count to prevent his scorpions from running all over the place. Gu Jin, Xiao Qie said over his shoulder, make a trip to the Beiyuan training grounds later to see He Rigu. Since Shen Zichuan was listening, Fei Sheng didn't question this. He bowed again to Xiao Qie and withdrew with Qiao Tianya. As guards, they couldn't very well stand under the eaves and chatter where their masters could hear. By silent agreement, everyone moved to the veranda at the other side of the courtyard to talk. The interior of the room was warm. Xiao Qie removed his blade and undressed, and Shen Zichuan gazed up at him from his chair. Xiao Qie had ridden non-stop from the front lines to border camp, then from border camp to Zhongbo. Yet he found it all worth it upon seeing the expression in Shen Zichuan's eyes. He leaned over, his body blocking the chair from the view of anyone in the doorway. You've gotten thinner. Shen Zichuan, still holding the brush, caressed its smooth shaft and whispered back, feigning ignorance. Thinner where? Xiao Qie cupped Shen Zichuan's chin to keep him from shying away, then pressed him into the chair for a kiss. Yes. No, Henry. I knew someone was gonna comment on that line. I was like, okay. Shen Zichuan tilted his head back exposing his elegant throat as he faced all of Xiaoqia's iciness and melted it with his gaze. Abandoning the brush, he slid his hands up Xiaoqia's arms and wound them around his neck as Xiaoqia scooped him up. This kiss contained no consolation, a sentiment that could be bestowed on them by others. The insatiable desire laid bare as they reached for each other was who they really were, the taste of their tongues unique to this pair of lovers. Xiaoqia craved such interdependence, both secretive and extreme. This was where he belonged, his territory. Shen Zichuan was burning up from the kiss. Xiaoqia set him on the table. Bracing a hand on either side of his hips, Xiaoqia gazed at him with all the seriousness he could muster. It didn't take long for the flush to spread from Shen Zichuan's earlobes to the corners of his eyes. He seemed as if he couldn't bear Xiaoqia any longer, couldn't endure such an invasive gaze. This seduction was a different kind of devastation. Despite being intimately familiar with one another, even with their eyes closed, they could find each other's most sensitive spots. In this moment, Shen Zichuan could feel his heartstrings stirring just from the tantalizing promise in Xiaoqia's eyes. His breathing quickened, and tiny beads of sweat glided along the satiny skin of his back. Xiaoqia looked so very dangerous, as if he would ravage Shen Zichuan like a tempest the moment he was freed of whatever shackles held him back. He needed Shen Zichuan far too much, yet he was unusually restrained. His desire surged like magma beneath a thin layer of ice. In Xiaoqia's regard, Shen Zichuan sensed a love so intense, so ardent, that it could crush him in its grip. This was the look of desire suppressed. Slowly, Xiaoqia kissed Shen Zichuan. He took off his outer robe and flung it over a chair. "I'm going to the bath." Shen Zichuan brushed fine sweat off Xiaoqia's jaw with one fingertip, then pulled away and blinked, motioning for him to go ahead. Interesting. That Xiaoqia is like, he's like kind of suppressing himself. It's too much. So he's just like, nah, I'm gonna take a bath. Huh. I mean, he probably really needs to take a bath, but still. When Xiaoqia reappeared, he had changed into fresh clothes. He was drying his hair in the inner chamber when he spotted a small box on the table. Inside were the gems and jades Yan Haru had sent. In the exterior chamber, Chen Yang was talking to Shen Zichuan. "I have to return to border camp in 3 days, but Master will stay." Shen Zichuan seemed to be looking over the documents on the table and was slow to answer. "The 2nd month is approaching. Has the location for the new stables on Mount Luo been decided?" Xiaoqia plucked up a piece of red jade and caressed it. "Yes," Chen Yang answered. "Once we reclaim Duanzhou, we can begin construction. The new spears General Lu wants should be ready by the end of the 2nd month, Shen Zichuan said. When the time comes, we'll send them directly via the new road." The rest of their talk all revolved around tedious duties. As Xiaoqia listened, he recalled the defensive battle he'd fought a few days back. The Imperial Army had been stationed at 2nd Sand Camp, where Xiaoqia had taken command in Zhang Sheng's place. Guo Weili and Zhao Hui had both been transferred back to their original camps, while Zuo Qianqiu and Lu Guangbai were jointly overseeing 1st Sand Camp. Xiao Jiming's intent with this arrangement was obvious. The Libe armored cavalry had given up advancing, and was now relying on the 2 men most skilled at defense to hold the front line against Hassan's attacks. Libe had gone completely on the defensive. Not only that, Xiao Jiming had made changes to troop organization. In the past, a change of general meant their entire command moved with them. All the soldiers had to be transferred between camps. It was different now. Other than Zuo Qianqiu, who remained in place at 1st Sand Camp, the other 3 commanding generals rotated at irregular intervals. This gave Guo Weili a splitting headache. The men he was used to leading would no longer be under his command, and Zuo Qianqiu was there looking over his shoulder during defensive battles. The chain around his neck had shortened so much it was strangling him, chafing him terribly. Meanwhile, Xiao Qia had to break away from the Imperial Army and adapt to the armored cavalry of the remaining two camps. It posed an even bigger challenge for Lu Guangbai, who had to familiarize himself with leading a cavalry after years of being an infantryman stuck to the ground. Everyone was crashing into one another as if they were bound hand and foot, unaccustomed to this new way of fighting. But the benefits were immediately apparent. Since the commanders rotated in random order, Hassan could never be sure whom his opponent would be when he launched an attack. The morale of the Libei armored cavalry was low after the loss of Xiao Fengshu, but they did not collapse as the Biansha horsemen had hoped. Hassan not only faced Zuo Qianqiu, who'd famously stood guard at Tianfei Watchtower, but also had to watch out for the infantry from Bianjun Commandery, who could conceal themselves in the snow. Hassan had no idea what had happened within Li Bei behind that iron wall, except that the swift victory he'd expected never came. Both parties instead fell into a stalemate, even more tense than before. It was only now that Hassan finally got a taste of how formidable Xiao Jiming truly was. The new prince of Li Bei was entirely unlike Xiao Fengshu. He seemed to have cowered away and holed himself up in Li Bei's homeland, but in reality, he had drawn a hard line on the eastern front, making it impossible for Hassan to gain even an inch. Xiao Qia shook off his distraction and closed the box. Chen Yang had taken his leave, and Shen Zichuan was still writing at the table. The rustle of ink and brush blended into the whisper of falling snow. Xiao Qia didn't go out and disturb him. He knew Shen Zichuan was in a rush to take down King Yi before the second month, and that the advisors were waiting for him in Zhou Wei's study to discuss the deployment of troops. Xiao Qia set his towel aside and fell back into the rumpled bedding. Shen Zichuan hadn't let the maidservants make the bed even when he was woken the night before. Make the bed when he was woken the night before. I don't know where I got the even from. Xiao Qia wondered if it was intentional. He could still imagine a whiff of Shen Zichuan's scent as he nestled under the covers. It left him instantly relaxed, dispelling the heavy mood that had shadowed him since leaving the battlefield. He did that on purpose. Xiao Qia closed his eyes and fell asleep before his hair had even dried. When Fei Sheng came to call Shen Zichuan in the late afternoon, he at last extracted himself from his work. "Open the windows, it's rather stuffy," he instructed Fei Sheng. As he rose, he remembered something and added, "Never mind, wait for me at the door." Fei Sheng bowed and retreated. The back of Shen Zichuan's neck was aching from bending over the desk too long. He lifted the hanging screen to the inner chamber, and heard Xiao Qia's steady breathing. Xiao Qia lay on his side, face half buried in the bedding. He had fallen into the deep sleep of the truly exhausted. The injury on his shoulder had yet to fully heal, but he seemed to feel nothing, though he had his full weight on it. Afraid he would aggravate it lying on it like this, Shen Zichuan gently tugged at the back of Xiao Qia's collar for a look. But even that slight force tipped him over onto his stomach. Smothered in the blankets, Xiao Qia surfaced groggily from sleep, sprawled on the bed. He murmured without opening his eyes, "Military report." Shen Zichuan leaned close to Xiao Qia's ear. "No reports. Go back to sleep." Xiao Qia turned his face to the side to breathe. Shen Zichuan wiped his sweat for him, his fingers exceedingly gentle as they moved over his brow. Xiao Qia grabbed his hand and held tight, refusing to let it go. "I won't be long," Shen Zichuan murmured. Whenever he used to speak in this tone back in Shudu, chances were he was trying to get under Xiao Qia's skin. But now, the way he said it was so light and gentle, like the downy caress of a feather. Not even 100 Yan Harus with their lilting accents could hold a candle to him. But Xiao Qia did not let go. Fei Cheng waited quite a while at the door, It was growing dark, and he feared if they delayed any further, the snowstorm would get heavier, and Chen Zichuan would catch a cold. He ducked back in and called softly from the other side of the hanging screen. "Master, it's time to go." After a moment's pause, Shen Zichuan replied, "Go stop Yuan Zhuo from heading over to the Zhou Manor. Tell him to come straight here instead. Then send someone to invite Zhou Gui and Changfeng over." He does have the gay accent. Oh my god. Also, you were so right, Vase. Shen Zichuan is not going in the bath with him again. Yeah, Blue, at least Xiaoqie is in a place where he can rest for a bit. I'm like, is he gonna hold this meeting with Xiaoqie just like continuously holding his hand? He's like, bring everyone over here because I can't move. It's like having a cat that's sitting on you. Fei Sheng understood that he meant to hold the discussion at home tonight. "Then shall I guide the gentleman to the side hall?" Shen Zichuan sat at the edge of the bed in the dimness. The lamps were still unlit. "Let's just talk in the outside chamber here. We'll keep our voices down." Fei Sheng nodded and took his leave, aware that the operative phrase was "keep our voices down." Hence, before the gentleman arrived, he called for his subordinates to quietly set up a screen in the outer chamber, partitioning off a corner of the room for their conversation. Finding the room empty upon entering, Zhou Gui and Kongling looked at each other in puzzlement. Fei Sheng hurriedly led them behind the screen. Voice low, he said, "My master's in the inner chamber." "Are ye too?" Kongling asked, lowering his voice to match. Fei Sheng nodded slightly. "Just to be safe," he added. "He's sleeping." It's like the cut sleeve thing, except instead of, "Oh, you fell asleep on me and I have to cut my sleeve so I can get up without waking you," it's, "You're holding my hand and I'm going to hold my meeting here instead of moving and making you let go of my hand." They were brewing the tea when Chao Tianyao wheeled Yao Wenyu in. Fei Sheng had laid out a rug to keep the wheelchair from making noise when it entered. Watching, Kongling couldn't help chuckling at Fei Sheng's enterprising talent of ingratiating himself. Yao Wenyu didn't inquire about Chen Zichuan's whereabouts. Handling the teacup with care so as not to make any noise, he said, "Shen Wei's declaration of war against King Yi was published today. We can expect activity from Fanzhou soon. I'll have to trouble your excellency to keep a close eye on the matter." None of the three had naturally loud voices, so they were all at ease murmuring behind the screen. Zhou Gui nodded. "Fanzhou is surrounded. King Yi and Mount Luo have reached no agreement, and his troops are too weak to mount any true resistance. I don't imagine he's one to fight to the death. He'll definitely attempt to bargain with us. It would be best if we didn't have to fight. As someone who had suffered the ravages of war, Kongling would rather exhaust every diplomatic word before drawing any blade. King Yi made lofty promises to the citizens of Fanzhou during his rise, yet to this day, he has not delivered on a single one. If he has any self-awareness, he should realize how powerless he is to resist. Even if King Yi himself is willing, the men under him might not be." Yao Wenyu thought for a moment longer. "Fanzhou and Dongzhou, which King Yi has claimed, both have a major bandit problem, even worse than it was in Chazhou. There's also bound to be interference from the brothels, where Cui Qing and her ilk have been trafficking children from decent families. These people know surrendering is as good as a death sentence." Shen Zichuan raised his hands to cover Xiaoqia's ears as he listened to their discussion in the darkness. Oh, they're killing me right now. Yao Wenyu was right. For both official and personal reasons, Shen Zichuan would never go easy on the bandits or the brothels. These people were the root of the corruption in Zhongbo's 2 southern prefectures. Allowing a scourge like this to survive would merely hinder the prefecture's progress. Shen Zichuan would exterminate them without hesitation, and they knew it. "What if we offer them a pardon when our troops are at their gates?" Zhou Gui put in. "Then make the arrests once the gates are open." Kongling shook his head, passing Jogwei a teacup as he did. Have you considered that if someone accuses us of going easy on the bandits and incites the common folk of both prefectures, it will tarnish the governor's reputation? In every step he took, Chen Zichuan was treading with caution. Even while scheming to conquer the four corners of the land, it was imperative they took Shen Zichuan's reputation into consideration. In an attempt to overwrite Shen Wei's infamy, every move they had made from Chazhou onward conspicuously proclaimed their benevolence and magnanimity. This was also why they required justification before waging any war, and why they could have no truck with bandits. Otherwise, even if they controlled all of Zhongbo in the future, Shen Zichuan would never establish himself as a virtuous ruler. Shen Zichuan was still considering their conversation when the crunch of footsteps sounded beneath the eaves. With Fei Sheng gone to the kitchen to call for Shen Zichuan's medicine, there was no one outside to welcome the newcomer. Gao Zhongxiong, oblivious to the low-voiced discussion taking place inside, patted snow off his shoulders and called out as he entered, "My greetings to your lordship. That declaration." The three men sitting in the outer chamber turned in unison and shushed him. Gao Zhongxiong's cheeks were red from the cold. He went silent at once and shrank his neck back. He was still feeling trepidatious when Zhou Gui beckoned him, but seeing as none of the gentlemen rebuked him, he gingerly tiptoed over and bent down to whisper, "I came to submit my report to his lordship." Unsure how to explain, Kongling merely said, "Later. Why don't you take a seat and have some tea?" Okay, that's the end of that chapter. We have one more chapter today. We're on page 109 for chapter 195, which is called Mastiffs. Like the dog? Question mark? Were mastiffs, like, used for hunting, or is that wrong? I feel like they were bred for some, like, purpose. But I don't know if that was it. Gao Zhongxiong didn't dare ask any more questions. He primly took a seat off to the side. The cold had nipped him badly on his way here. He sat in the warmth, sensation returned in his ears that had been frozen numb. Noting that Gao Zhongxiong wore an old robe, Zhou Gui said, "It's bitterly cold in Suzhou. You're underdressed for this weather." Gao Zhongxiong looked a little embarrassed. He clutched the hem of his robe and answered in a minuscule voice, "Of course, you're right." They're hunting dogs, war dogs, guard dogs. Okay, interesting. Observant as always, Kongling stepped in. "The yamen you work in is a poor one. You're in a far worse position than those in lucrative posts. Any money that passes through your hands is small change. What's more, you've only just arrived in Suzhou. It can't be easy to get settled in a whole new place. If there's anything you need, don't hesitate to ask." His show of concern put Gao Zhongxiong instantly at ease. His eyes misted over, and he hurriedly stood to bow. "You have all shown me utmost solicitude. The governor, especially, has treated me with such tremendous kindness." Zhou Gui waved a hand. "Take a seat. There's no one else here tonight. No need to stand on ceremony." Gao Zhongxiong had no wife, children, or relatives in Suzhou. Given his associations, no one at the yamen dared to let him pick up the tab during their usual social functions. His monthly salary should have been more than sufficient. What he didn't dare tell anyone was that all his money had gone to support Han Jin. Shen Zichuan had released Han Jin from prison the previous autumn and settled him in a side courtyard. The former commissioner of the 8 great battalions had suffered greatly in prison. Supplied with adequate meat and wine upon his release, he did nothing but eat and drink to his heart's content for weeks after gaining his freedom. Shen Zichuan had sent several attendants to the courtyard to take care of his needs. And once he was back in the pink of health, a young servant was even assigned to play with him. The lad took Han Jin along to throw dice and watch cricket fights. Keeping him so entertained, he soon abandoned himself to pleasure and picked up a gambling habit along the way. In less than 2 months, he'd forgotten all about returning to Chudu. Feeling cooped up in the courtyard, he began venturing out of the manor with his personal servant, bringing the house down anywhere he went, drinking and carousing without a care in the world. But Chen Zichuan had allocated only so much money toward Hanjin's upkeep. Since he couldn't stop himself from gambling, he had to find the funds elsewhere. And so he had set his sights on Gao Zhongxiong's. He showed up at Gao Zhongxiong's house almost every day, shouting disloyal turncoat slave at the top of his lungs and cornering him to demand money as soon as he set foot outside. Gao Zhongxiong was helpless to deal with him and embarrassingly low on cash. How would he have money to buy winter clothes? Within the inner chamber, Shen Zichuan's fingertips had gone numb in Xiaoqia's grasp, though his mind was sharp as ever as he listened to their conversation. The wind had picked up after dark, sending snow-like puffs of cotton dancing through the sky. The wind chimes under the eaves clanked without cease. Fearing the din would disrupt the discussion within, Gujin, who had just returned from Beiyuan training grounds, called for someone to take them down. As he swept snow from his hair, he saw Fei Sheng approaching from the other end of the walkway. Looking for Arya. Hands occupied with the tray holding Shen Zichuan's medicine, Fei Sheng jerked his chin toward the room. He's resting. Master won't allow us to call for him. The journey's been tough on all of you. It's snowing so hard. Riding in this weather will be the death of me. Gujin had only just dismounted, and his ears were so numb for the wind he could feel nothing in them. Arya hasn't had a decent night's sleep for the past fortnight. Right, and that last chapter was called Sound Sleep, because he was finally getting his sound sleep. Fei Sheng sighed. Gujin stepped aside. Go on ahead. Don't hold the governor up from taking his medicine. Fei Sheng strode forward, then turned back and said in a hushed tone, They're going to be busy inside for quite a while. There's no need for anyone to stand guard here. When Chen Yang and Qiao Tianya return later, go to the duty room with them and rest. I'll have some snacks and hot tea sent over so you can have something in your stomachs at least. No one knew when Xiaoqia would wake up, but when he did, he would no doubt want to see them immediately. They'd been on the move for days now, and standing in the bitter wind was nigh unbearable. Days, who is your ship? Gujin and Fei Sheng? This wasn't. I'm thinking about that. Like, wait a minute, what? Or do you mean some? I don't know if you mean them or somebody else, but yes, okay, them. Interesting. I could see it. No, I could see it. This was indeed a thoughtful offer. The duty room was just a stone's throw from the courtyard, and they could dart out in the blink of an eye if they were called. Gujin cupped his fists in thanks for Fei Sheng's kindness, and held up the hanging screen for him to enter. Shen Zichuan had given no order to light the lamps, so Fei Sheng didn't offer. He entered with the tray in hand and ladled the medicine into a porcelain bowl. Yao Wenyu and the rest were still speaking in the outer room at a volume only Shen Zichuan could hear. Shen Zichuan took the spoon in his free hand and sipped slowly. Fei Sheng had stepped as quietly as possible, but Xiaoqia still woke up. Brow furrowed, Xiaoqia took a moment to orient himself before sitting up in one swift move. His black shadow abruptly enveloped Shen Zichuan, giving Fei Sheng a fright. Blinking away his heavy sleep, Xiaoqia turned to Shen Zichuan and rasped, What time is it? Shen Zichuan set down his spoon and looked at Fei Sheng. Arya, it's a few hours since the sunset, Fei Sheng answered. To Xiaoqia's surprise, he had slept almost 6 hours, and he was still holding Shen Zichuan's hand. He rubbed his neck with his free hand. Is Gujin back? Fei Sheng collected the bowl and spoon. Only this moment. They're all in the duty room now. I'll get someone to summon them if Arya wishes. Go, Xiaoqia said, rising. Tell them to meet me in the side hall. I'll be there shortly. Hearing voices in the inner chamber, the group outside fell quiet. Fei Sheng stepped out with the empty bowl, glanced meaningfully at the gentleman in the outer chamber, and ducked under the hanging screen to call for someone to summon Chen Yang and the others. Shen Zichuan flexed his numb fingers, gone red in Xiaoqia's grip. As Xiaoqia pulled on his outer robe, he asked, "Have you been sitting here all this time?" The bitterness of the medicine still pervaded Shen Zichuan's mouth. Thoughts occupied with the situation in Fanzhou, he replied, somewhat distracted, "That's right, my back's aching." Xiaoqia poured himself a cup of cooled tea and held it in his mouth as he quickly dressed. When he saw Shen Zichuan get to his feet, he stood in his path, refusing to let him leave. Shen Zichuan raised his eyebrows in question, and Xiaoqia took hold of his chin. Shen Zichuan wasn't tall enough to reach Xiaoqia's lips to begin with, and Xiaoqia didn't bend down when he held Shen Zichuan's chin. Shen Zichuan was forced to stand on tiptoe as Xiaoqia kissed him, letting the tea flow onto Shen Zichuan's tongue and sweep away the lingering bitterness. Xiaoqia drew Shen Zichuan into his arms, and Shen Zichuan gripped Xiaoqia's sleeves as he plundered Shen Zichuan's mouth until his knees went weak. Unable to hold the tea in his mouth, Shen Zichuan hastily swallowed, only to choke and burst into a fit of coughs. Those in the outer room had already drunk their fill of tea. Hearing the coughs, Zhou Gui worried Shen Zichuan had caught another cold. Before he could voice his concern, Kongling spoke up. "The stove burns too hot in this room. I'll wheel Yuan Zhuo to the door for some air." How's that for... Yes, he complained that his back ached. How's that for a stretch? Yao Wenyu arranged his cloak and agreed. "Yes, I'll have to trouble Mr. Chongfeng." The two of them hustled Zhou Gui outside. After waiting under the eaves for less than the time it took an incense stick to burn, they saw Xiaoqia step out. The group bowed. "Arya." Xiaoqia's chin was slightly flushed from being knocked against. Seeing that Chen Yang and the rest had arrived, he returned their greeting. "I was worn out from the journey these past few days and kept you gentlemen from your official business. You have my sincere apologies." "Arya, you've been working day and night on the battlegrounds," Kongling said. "Naturally you should rest." They bowed once more to Xiaoqia, who sped away with his own men to the side hall without further ado. Zhou Gui shivered under the eaves. He swept a glance at his companions and asked in bafflement, "Shall we go in?" Yao Wenyu sighed softly, but he couldn't hold back a smile as he gestured toward the hanging screen. "Let's go. You first, Your Excellency." While the leaders of Zhezhou debated through the night, Fanzhou had already received the declaration of war. This was far from the first time King Yi had received such a denunciation from Zhezhou, but their mutual sniping last year had come to naught. Shen Zichuan had shown no intention of mobilizing troops to fight him. He took the proclamation this time for a similarly empty threat, and thought nothing of it. Fanzhou's government had expanded anew. King Yi had gathered all the gold, silver, and other treasures he's plundered from Fanzhou and Dongzhou into a heap, and called it the state treasury. He claimed to be saving these valuables to purchase grain and farmland in the spring, but in reality, he had appropriated them for himself in order to fund his lavish lifestyle. The number of common folks from the two prefectures who had either starved or frozen to death in the heavy snow this year was incalculable. Just a few days ago, several more houses had collapsed, and sent even more people to their graves. King Yi turned a deaf ear to the reports from his subordinates, and continued to indulge in debauchery. Many who had stood by King Yi's side during his initial revolt had been slaughtered in the subsequent fight for arable land, and the majority who remained were bandits from the southern prefectures. When King Yi had crowned himself, he had promised the scholars of both prefectures that he would bring about great change and restore the livelihoods of the people. But as soon as he settled himself atop his self-proclaimed throne, he took up his blade and cut down any scholars who remonstrated with him. Many commoners of the two prefectures, finding themselves even worse off than before, attempted to flee through the snowstorm. Those captured were executed on the spot by soldiers under King Yi's command. Any unlucky enough to be dragged back alive were branded with a mark on their chest, and thrown into Fanzhou's prison as prey for King Yi's winter hunts. Oh, I don't like that, especially in conjunction with the title of the chapter, his winter hunts. Is he like, he set up like the game where he hunts people for sport? Yeah, okay. It was well after midnight. The pot-bellied King Yi reclined on satin cushions, drinking himself drunk to the music of reed pipes. He lifted his golden cup high. Fill it up. Two scantily clad women on either side of him stepped forward to pour his wine. Leaning back on his elbows, King Yi muttered, "Keep pouring, keep pouring." The ruby-red wine spilled over the rim of the cup and trickled down the woman's white jade arm, wetting the collar that gaped around her bosom. She snuggled into King Yi's embrace as he roared with laughter. He had long lost any sense of propriety. He reached a hand into her bodice, fondling her in front of everyone. Cui Qing sat to the left of King Yi. A fresh-faced young man with dashing good looks knelt before her, holding her long-stemmed pipe. She took a drag, her eyes darting down below the youth's waist. "I escaped Dunzhou by the skin of my teeth. How will your highness reward me? I think this one will do just fine. With some proper coaching from me, he'll be incredible." The young man was handsome, with an unpowdered face, broad shoulders, and a trim waist. He raised his head to glance at her, the expression in his eyes sultry and frank. A tingle coursed through Cui Qing's body, and her heart itched. King Yi, large as he was, gestured for the woman serving him to help him turn his head. He looked down at the young man and sneered. "You certainly have a good eye. Do you know who this is?" Cui Qing lifted a foot and set it on the man's chest, feeling solid muscle beneath her sole. "I've never seen his like. Sweet thing. Would you like to come home with me?" King Yi laughed boisterously, then dropped his voice to a malicious hiss. "His surname is Hua Lingyun, the eldest lawful son of Hua Qing. Know him? He was the commander of the Dongzhou garrison troops before the dogs got him. I was trying to take over Dongzhou, and Hua Qing preferred to die rather than yield. He killed my younger brother in that battle. After I'd captured him, I had him tortured for 7 days and nights before dumping him in the hunting grounds so the mastiffs could tear him to pieces." Cui Qing uttered a surprised "oh my" and moved in to scrutinize Hua Lingyun's handsome face. With a cackle, she said, "Then your majesty is truly magnanimous to have kept him by your side and raised him into such a pretty thing." "I initially wanted to kill him," King Yi said contemptuously. "He looks like a gentleman, but he's as timid as a mouse. When he saw his old man eaten by dogs, he threw himself down to hug my thighs and begged me to spare his life. To save himself, he was willing to submit to me like an animal, so I kept him as a dog by my side." Cui Qing ran her hands over Hua Lingyun's chest, and Hua Lingyun responded with an ingratiating smile. She gave him a tender push and said, "Good puppy. Show Mama how obedient you are." King Yi tossed his golden cup aside. "There's nothing he won't do, and he holds up pretty well. I gave him to Chief Fang to play with for 7 or 8 days, and he was still alive when he returned." Cui Qing's expression frosted over. "That Fang the 10th is still so despicable in his old age," she snapped. He can hardly control his bowels these days. He can hardly control his bowels these days, yet he'd vie with me over a man. Look at him. Look at me, darling. I'm much nicer looking than that old geezer. It must have been hard on you serving a wrinkled old macaque like him." Hua Lingyun's chest heaved. His clothes hung loosely off him, secured only around his waist. He was all docile obedience as Cui Qing pressed in. The interior of the hall was a wanton scene, made more obscene by the reedy moan Cui Qing let slip as Hua Lingyun returned her fondling. She fell back onto the cushion and motioned for him to continue. King Yi, having already overindulged in carnal pleasures, applied himself to his wine. He loved wine as he did his life, and he drank himself bloated amid his bawdy court. As he rested upon the tender, fragrant bodies of the women around him, who dutifully massaged his shoulders and kneaded his legs, his snores rumbled like thunder. The snow outside fell for half the night. By the time the sky began to pale with dawn, King Yi and his guests were sleeping like the dead. Arms spread across his silk cushions, King Yi exhaled stale breath that reeked of wine. Nearby, Hua Lingyun wiped dried sweat off his body. He looked at King Yi, only a short distance away then, moving soundlessly amid the deafening okay, hold on. I need to redo the emphasis on that sentence. He looked at King Yi, only a short distance away, then, moving soundlessly amid the deafening snores, stepped over the others to squat down beside his head. King Yi didn't like his guards too close when he was making merry. He feared death, so the guards with their blades were ordered to stand outside the doors. Hua Lingyun had served as a plaything under King Yi's command for half a year, suffering unimaginable humiliation, all for an opportunity like this. He looked at King Yi as if he was the dogs that had torn his father apart. 3 soft knocks sounded on the door. Hua Lingyun knew then that they'd succeeded, but he didn't stand. Instead, he patted King Yi's cheek and picked up a cushion. King Yi's snores stuttered as he stirred in his sleep. His splayed hand knocked aside the empty golden cup. He clattered noisily to the floor, and he finally opened his eyes. On seeing Hua Lingyun, he broke out in a cold sweat. "Away with you." Hua Lingyun burst into action. He ruthlessly planted the cushion over King Yi's face. King Yi struggled violently, the flailing of his thick limbs startling some of the others in the hall awake. Hua Lingyun trapped all that pasty, rippling flesh under the cushion. King Yi gasped for breath that would not come. Cui Ching wrote, I've stopped being able to read. Oh my god. Cui Ching woke groggily, looking around without comprehension. Huffing for breath, the terrified King Yi's muffled shouts came through the cushion. "Men! Men! Save me!" Hua Lingyun began to laugh. He released his grip on the struggling King Yi, abandoning his attempt to smother him. King Yi scrambled out from under Hua Lingyun's hands and promptly sank into the pillows around him, unable to move under his own weight. He shouted himself hoarse. "Men, come quick!" Hua Lingyun felt for an object hidden in the folds of material around his waist, and stalked after King Yi. Naked, King Yi writhed on the ground like a maggot, shouting for his guards. Gradually, he realized such silence meant the guards at the door were already dead. He heaved his heavy body forward, weeping in terror, and prostrated himself at Hua Lingyun's feet. Lingyun. He pulled over the first woman he could reach, and shoved her toward Hua Lingyun. "Let me live, and I'll give you Fanzhou. Everything I have is yours. You can have the title of King Yi, too." Chest heaving, Hua Lingyun yanked King Yi up by the hair. King Yi was still reeling from the sudden reversal. Before he had fallen asleep, everyone in Fanzhou was still at his command. He kicked his legs and squealed like a stuck pig. It finally struck Cui Ching what was happening. She fumbled desperately for her clothing as Hua Lingyun dragged King Yi closer to her, frantically shaking her head. "It has nothing to do with me. Nothing to do with..." A thunderous blast exploded in her ears. Y'all. Oh my god. Oh my god. Hold on. I'm freaking out. Okay, we're gonna get there. But I'm freaking out. A thunderous blast exploded in her ears, leaving them ringing. Her eyes were wide as she froze in place, stupefied and voiceless, her face splattered with red and white gore. The area between Hua Lingyun's thumb and index finger burned from the recoil of the bronze musket. We have guns! We finally have guns in this story! The sensation thrilled him. King Yi's head looked like a watermelon trampled to a pulp. I see that there's art on the next page. I don't know what it's gonna be. I'm not gonna look at it yet. We're gonna read the rest of the chapter first. Finally, the guns. Blue, you forgot about the gun? A deathly silence descended over the hall, broken a moment later by Cui Ching's sharp scream. She scrambled forward on all fours like a madwoman. Then, clutching her clothes, she ran barefoot across the hall and lunged at the doors. But when the doors swung open, Cui Ching scrabbled backward and fell, her eyes trained on the doorway crammed with rifles. Okay, you didn't forget about the guns, but you forgot about this. Okay, fair. Faze, you said, never thought I'd be so excited about guns. I'm a very bad Texan. Right, like, I don't... guns in real life, boo. Guns in my 1600s era, Danmei, yes, please. More guns. Okay. She scrambled forward on all fours like a madwoman. Then, clutching her clothes, she ran barefoot across the hall and lunged at the doors. But when the doors swung open, Cui Ching scrabbled backward and fell. Oh yeah, I already read that, sorry. You abducted women for him. Hua Lingyun stood in the shadows, scraping splattered bits of King Yi's head off his cheek, and tasting them before spitting them back out. Okay. He stared at Cui Ching, his voice frigid. You reared those mastiffs for him. Cui Ching shook her head, covering her body as she crawled across the floor. She heard the sound of barking, and saw the teeth of those very mastiffs as they tried to squeeze through the legs of the men at the door. Hua Lingyun stepped on King Yi's corpse and ran his gaze over the guests in the hall, as though sizing up meat on the chopping block. All of you ought to get a taste of what they can do. Cui Ching's eyes bulged. She tried to push to her feet to run, but she'd gone weak in the knees. She watched helplessly as the dogs broke free of their chains and pounced. It's... Sorry, I'm getting too distracted. There's too much happening. Wait, let me finish that sentence. She watched helplessly as the dogs broke free of their chains and pounced, her own screams echoing in her ears. It's Hua, H-U-O. Amid the cacophony of the mastiffs feeding, Hua Lingyun draped his wide-sleeved robe over his shoulders. He picked up the declaration of war King Yi had flung away and crushed it in his hand. Well, I guess we're looking at the art now. There's a man with a gun in my Danmei. And this is how we end the stream. Yeah, Oh, I know what you mean. Like, the way he's drawn. He's just, like, big, generally. I don't know. Henry, you need to look up fanfiction where, we're feeling... Right, no, it's like, in this context, it's obviously to point towards the fact that, like, he had everything and his people had nothing and they were literally starving. Like, okay, I get it. But yes, also, Henry might be my new favorite, Hua Lingyun, he might be my favorite new side character as well, because, oh my god. Like, and the fact that, like, he put himself through what he put himself because he knew he could get close to King Yi and these other people and be part of this plan. And my question now is, like, is this a plan that was executed on in conjunction with, like, Shen Zichuan and what his people were planning over there? Like, were they, like, in on exactly what was going to happen here? Or is this, like, totally, I don't know, a separate thing? Like, they didn't know about this? Because what I want to know is if, can we get the source of the guns in touch with, like, Shen Zichuan and Xiao Qia and get everybody having guns? That's what I've been thinking about, like, the whole time. Since, like, what, book 1 they mentioned guns, I've been like, we need to put guns in people's hands. the time that I'm the most staunch advocate for guns. Oh, that's true. I do also hope that he's on our side. I hope he is not on another side, because that would be a problem. That's a good point. We don't really know whose side he's on. So I do hope that, this, like... I hope that this is part of something that is or can become an alliance. Because if not, that's going to be a problem. You were too distracted by him tasting the blood. See, he didn't just taste the blood, though. He tasted, like, bits of flesh. I'm pretty sure. That's what got me there. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. But I get it. What for... Yeah, no, I get it. It's the perfect revenge. Revenge of the traumatized. And this chapter being called Mastiffs, that's beautiful. Okay. So, when we come back next week on Monday, we will be on chapter 196, which is called Old Man. I don't know who this old man is. I have not forgotten that Yanharu is scheming to keep Shenzachuan sick. Like, there's so many developments this stream. Like, Yanharu's scheme that we just learned about. And, you know, what could he be doing with the doctor? And he was trying to find Heiragu. And then this. Guns. Revenge. We killed King Yi. New epic side character. Really hope he's on our side. It's kind of a lot. It's a lot to process. And in the meantime, Shenzachuan and Xiaoqia being, like, really sweet. And yeah. It just... everything. This really is not the first two streams of this book that I expected. Which, it would have been fine if it had been this way. Because I would have, like, totally understood. But I was like... we're in the angst part of the story. And this is not really the angst part of the story. This is something else. Henry, you're going to confront some newly awakened parts of yourself. It starts off with a bang, literally. Oh my god. No, yeah, Blue, the fact that he tasted it just to spit it out, it's a bit disturbing, but I get it. Yeah, exactly. Yes. You think, Blue, you think you should have made it last longer as a treat, but that's more Lanzhou's thing. That is more Lanzhou's thing. No, oh my goodness. This is amazing. I'm sad that we have to end right here. I want to find out what happens next. I want to know. Although we're probably gonna, you know, flip away from this plot for a while and focus on something else and, you know, it'll be dragged out until we find out what actually happened here afterwards. But anyway, I will see y'all on Monday. Yeah, this stop is cruel. I'm sorry. So see you on Monday. Have a good rest of your week. Until then. Bye.